Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to another sermon from the Gardner Lane Church of Christ. Today the church family at Gardner Lane is meeting at 10:30, but at the same time, for those that are unable to be here, we want to continue to tape the sermons and the Bible classes for those until they're able to be back with us once again. So we appreciate you tuning in and listening to us today. In Acts, the 11th chapter, there is an international crisis, that of famine. And this famine evidently existed for a long period of time. It started maybe about AD 45. Today, as we look at this from Acts, the 11th chapter, we want to deal with this. And we want to look at the faith of the first century Christians so that we can grow stronger as well. It's a situation that we can relate to right now. It says in verse 27 of Acts, the 11th chapter, "Now at this time some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. And one of them, named Agabus, stood up and began to indicate by the Spirit that there would certainly be a great famine all over the world, not just in Rome, not just in Judea, but this famine was going to occur all over the world. Now, this took place in the reign of Claudius. We see beginning in verse 29, "And in the proportion that any of the disciples had means, each of them determined to send a contribution for relief to the brethren living in Judea. And this they did, sending it in charge of Barnabas and Saul to the elders." We see this is the area that we're dealing with here at this time as he comes back from the first missionary journey. This is Antioch of Syria, or Syrian Antioch. There's two. There's Antioch of Pisidia. But this is Antioch of Syria, and it's about 300 miles from Jerusalem. We know the church at Antioch very well. We've talked about imitating this church many times in different sermons and Bible classes. It was a church with wonderful teachers. Just like we at Gardner Lane, we have many wonderful teachers here at this time. Different men who teach on Wednesday night. The elders, they teach on Sunday morning. Women teach the Bible classes to the children, as well as teaching at different times in their homes to different people. And we are just blessed with so many wonderful teachers. It's a church that sent out evangelists. It sent out evangelists like Saul and Barnabas here at this time. We have a local church like that. We probably have 10 or more men that are able to go out and preach the gospel at any time to various places, and especially at home at Gardner Lane, and we are certainly blessed with that, and we certainly appreciate those men and their willingness to do that. We have a church family with many diverse backgrounds. We see in Acts the 11th chapter, and in verse 20 it talks about different ones from different places as they came to that seaport area. We see so many people from so many different parts of the world making up that local church in Antioch. And today, a church that responds with faith. As we look back at this church some 2,000 years ago and learn from that church today. There were 4 famines known during the reign of Claudius. The first one occurred in the city where he was emperor in 41-42 AD. The second occurred in the region of Judea, as well as all over the world in 45 AD. The region of Greece in 50 AD. And then the fourth in the city of Rome in 52 AD. It's interesting concerning this that Claudius, he was the fifth emperor of Rome. He came to the throne in 41 AD. He was married to a woman named Agrippina who finally murdered him so that her son Nero could take over as emperor in Rome. The famine in Judea, it's described by the Jewish historian Josephus And it may have lasted some 3 years. You think about us being isolated for 2 months. But to go through what these Christians, as well as others, went through for 3 years. It was confirmed by a prophet, Agabus. Agabus is mentioned different times in the Bible. In Acts, the 11th chapter, and in verse 28, it says, one of them named Agabus stood up and began to indicate by the Spirit that there would certainly be a great famine all over the world. And this took place in the reign of Claudius. We also see him dealing with the Apostle Paul. In Acts, the 11th chapter, as Paul, as he's making his way back to Jerusalem, to send a contribution back to the saints there, much of what 2 Corinthians is about. He says in Acts 21, in verses 10 through 12, and as they were staying for some days, a prophet named Agabus came down from Judea. And coming to us, he took Paul's belt and bound his own feet and his hands, saying, this is what the Holy Spirit says. In this way, the Jews at Jerusalem will bind the man who owns this belt and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. And when we heard this, we as well as the local residents began begging him not to go up to Jerusalem. In fact, Paul says in the next verse, you're breaking my heart. We also see something from 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and in verse 23. And that is, let 2 or 3 prophets speak and let the others pass judgment. And we see what evidently Agabus was saying was true, because they were confirming the same prophecy. In Josephus' time, he writes concerning this. In the highlighted part, it says, many people died from want of money to procure food. So Queen Helena, she distributed to those that had need. She sent great sums of money to the principal men in Jerusalem. We also see in Josephus that a great famine occurred in Judea. Responding with faith will bring out the best in one another. I remember as a kid, sometimes we'd be playing and maybe we need to go up into the tree house. And I'd tell the boy next door, I'd say, hey, Timmy, give me a boost. And that's what he'd do. He'd lock his hands together and I'd step into his hands and he'd boost me up into the tree house. And that's what we're needing right now. We might be just needing a little boost right now. Not the fact that we're going to stay on each other's backs for the next 3 or 4 years. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about the fact, just a temporary lift up. And these saints at Antioch show us some things that we can do. First of all, in our discipleship, regarding their discipleship. We see in verse 26 of Acts 11, they were first called Christians in Antioch. The people were like Christ. Why does he then turn around in the passages that we read earlier this morning and call them disciples? Because they had taken the teachings of Jesus to heart and said that they were going to live that way. They were going to take these things to action. And there's been many things that the Church of Gardner Lane has determined to do over the past 9 weeks, and we're very appreciative regarding those things. In our fellowship, the relief of the brethren living in Judea. We think about our worship this morning. And over the last 9 weeks or so, it's not what we really wanted it to be or what we'd like it to be. But at the same time, our unity does not depend upon our geography. And we saw people gathering together, people that were studying, people that were partaking of the Lord's Supper, people that were involved in the different acts of worship every Sunday. And we appreciate that. In our generosity, they determined to send a contribution. They were not reckless with their money. But they were not heartless as well. They understood that this was going to go all over the world. And it was going to go over the world. Maybe it was going to affect me as well. But no, they understood that people had needs here at this time. They weren't selfish. They weren't greedy. They sent a contribution back to those in Judea. They moved to help those locally and probably to help those globally. And that's what we're going to have to ready ourselves to do as well. And our leadership sent it in charge of Barnabas and Saul to the elders. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think the elders in Judea slept very well, knowing that this famine was going to occur for a long period of time. I know that over the last 9 to 11 weeks, the elders at Gardner Lane haven't slept very well because we were concerned about so many things regarding the people of God. Responding with faith, it brings us into the footsteps of Jesus. He was saying to them, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. We appreciate you tuning in today. We look forward to being with you again next week. And until next week, we ask that God continue to bless you. Thank you very much.